All right, so moving on to a little bit more about the practical and ethical implications of the work. So I think one of the do you guys think about how this contributes towards some kind of a societal impact and implications for readers who should be aware of when they're thinking about and building models from the perspective that you have developed in this paper?
I guess there are a bunch of different angles that we didn't explore as much in detail in the paper, but we kind of talked about them in the commentaries, right? I guess, like you could talk about stuff regarding to algorithmic fairness. We could talk about stuff like interpretability, right? And so to talk a little bit about that, Edward McFarlane III, which was one of the people commenting on our paper, he made this very important point that small degree of bias in the estimate could make a huge difference if you're close to the decision boundary, right? Yeah. Right, and it could be like you're very far from the decision boundary, and like a huge bias in the estimate is not going to affect things at all, right? And so again, the perspective of decision making is critical, right? Because if we are arguing that at the end of the day, the person is going to be affected by the decision itself, not by the estimate, right? And so again, bringing this perspective of decision making to the table, I think it's really, really important. So that's one.
Let me jump in right here, because let me challenge the readers and the listeners. Go out there if you're interested in fairness, and in the, and in that, that world, which is obviously very important. Go out there, look at the papers, read the papers, see whether you think those papers are actually asking about the bias in the predictions or the bias in the decisions that are being made. I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm saying sometimes they're talking about one, sometimes they're talking about the other. And secondly, when they're talking about the bias in the decisions are being made, do they ever actually talk about how they choose what decisions they make? Right? My experience has been with these papers, often when they're talking about the decisions that are being made, they're not talking about whether the decisions are actually being made with deep understanding of the decision-making process, right? It's too big an area for me to say too much about it, but I just challenge you, take this perspective of the difference between the prediction, the decision being made, and what is the decision logic? Is it even the right decision logic, right? And apply it back there. And I think this will, it's, to me personally, it's eye-opening to go back and to, and to think about those things.
That's a good, there's a pipeline that we have. The entire pipeline needs to be appropriately adjusted for. And the decision, if you're attempting, I think there's a first time starting from the end, the decision making, and that needs to be corrected. And slowly we can correct for other things, but the decision making is the one that is affecting for customers decision making, or even in case of like fairness, about especially if these models are being used for kind of more critical decisions like judiciary decisions being made, then you'd have to be careful about how this can work. So in that way, I like that perspective that it provides as well.